All right. Welcome to the last webinar, webinar 4 for the Backs in Action Rehab and Wellness Center. This webinar is on lifestyle factors related to aging and longevity. If you've been following along, you know who I am, Ryan Takagi. I'm a chiropractor. I also did a Master's of Science in Nutrition, and I did a Bachelor of Kinesiology. Some of the objectives for this webinar, some of the things I want you to take away are: what is aging? What are the lifestyle factors? And then how do they relate to aging? Starting with the first one, what is aging? I like this definition of aging. It is simply the changes that happen through your lifetime. So I like this one because it doesn't suggest any negative or positive connotations to aging. It just says it's the changes that are happening through your lifespan. A common question that comes with aging is, what are the causes of aging, or what is the cause? And if I had an answer to this, I'd probably have a Nobel Prize of some kind. There are a lot of people looking into this question, and there have been a lot of theories that have tried to address it, such as program theories that suggest that aging is a programmed process, so it's just something that happens at the end of our lives. Or there's damage theories that suggest that due to the accumulation of damage throughout our lifespan, that accumulation ultimately results in the aging process. And there are a few physiological processes associated with aging, things like oxidative stress and inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, et cetera, et cetera. And these are important because when I talk about the lifestyle factors, people often refer back to these physiological processes as mechanisms through which things like exercise and movement or nutrition are having a positive impact on aging. So they might be lessening oxidative stress or inflammation, as an example. So there's some associations there. So what are the lifestyle factors then? We can group these multiple different ways, but one type of grouping that I like are these 5 categories that include relationships or communities. So essentially this is, do you have a good network of people that you can connect with, that you can share with? Sleep is another category that includes the quantity of sleep, how many hours you're getting, as well as the quality of your sleep. Do you feel rested when you wake up in the morning? Stress includes the stressors that you're exposed to throughout your lifetime, as well as the coping mechanisms and resources you have to manage those stressors. Nutrition includes things like what you're eating, as well as how much you're eating and when you're eating. And movement, we talked about this in the third webinar, things like endurance exercises and resistance training and stretching all fit into this movement category. I'm going to focus this webinar on movement and nutrition, but that doesn't mean that these 3 on top here aren't important. They are equally important. I just want to direct us to these 2 on the bottom. So when we think about movement and nutrition, some of the categories that we want to focus on, especially related to aging, are cardiovascular exercise or movement, resistance training, balance training. All of these are really important as we age. And then under nutrition, things that I already mentioned, but what we eat, when we eat, and how much we eat. So I'm going to focus on each of these individually now. So under movement, some key principles that relate to all 3 types of exercises, so cardiovascular, resistance, and balance, are things like safety. So it is important to not only understand how to perform a movement, but also how that movement should feel. So people like kinesiologists or personal trainers or physiotherapists are really great at helping you with that and making sure that the movement is safe for you. And they're also very good at individualizing that movement. So making sure it fits your goals, making sure it fits your physical capacity. Periodization is another important principle that refers to cycling through periods of higher intensity movements or more intense movements, and then periods of rest. So making sure your body has time to recover from that cardiovascular exercise or resistance exercise. And progression is the last important principle, where we want to make sure that as you perform movements and exercises, that they're also progressing either in intensity or in volume or in duration, or they're maybe becoming more specific towards a certain task or a certain sport. And also remember that something is better than nothing. I think there's enough research out there that suggests that even if you can't do 150 minutes of cardiovascular movement per week, even 70 minutes is better than zero. So wherever you're at right now in your life, something is better than nothing. And the reason movement is so important is because it can result in improvements in fitness, in strength, in power, in mobility, in daily function, psychosocial well-being, as well as improving resistance to injuries and falls, which can be quite detrimental in older age. So if we look at each of these three types of movement and talk about specific recommendations, for cardiovascular or endurance exercise, it is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity per week. You can refer back to that third webinar for some examples of types of movement. For resistance training, it's 2 to 3 times per week. And you might be performing 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 12 repetitions. So 2 sets of 10 is a good starting point. And for balance training, trying things like yoga or Tai Chi or kitchen sink exercises, I also mentioned in that third webinar, which start with standing on 2 legs, progressing to lifting a leg, eventually balancing on 1 leg, and then potentially taking away different sensory inputs like sight and trying to balance with your eyes closed, or even adding a cognitive task seems to be quite beneficial for balance, such as trying to balance on 1 leg while doing a math problem. Moving on to nutrition, the 3 categories I mentioned were what, when, and how much. And for what, the first thing I really want to emphasize is water is important. So as we get older, the cues to drink water, those thirst cues, tend to become less. So we tend to drink a little bit less water as we age. So I just want to emphasize that drinking water throughout your day, or if you're listening to this in recording or right now, maybe having a sip of water is going to be really important. The Mediterranean diet is one that's been researched quite a bit, is a really good starting point. That includes a diet high in vegetables, high in fruits, also contains nuts and legumes and fatty fish and healthy oils. So this is a really good diet to start with. And then we talk about when and how much. Caloric restriction is one thing that's been associated with healthy aging or with positive longevity over and over again. And there's different ways to restrict the calories that you're consuming. You can try time restricted eating, where you're only eating between certain hours of the day, or there's a whole bunch of fasting variations that are becoming increasingly more popular. So fasting is another option to try. So how do these lifestyle factors relate to aging? So one thing that I want to mention here first is defining health span versus lifespan. So health span is the quality of the years lived, versus lifespan is simply the number of years lived. And longevity refers to living long with good health and a good quality of life. So these positive lifestyle factors, so a positive diet and positive movement, or having movement in your life, are associated with better longevity, with a longer health span, so more quality years lived. And I also want to mention here that lifestyle is not in its own little bubble. There are many other factors that play a role, such as the social determinants of health. So just keeping in mind that some people maybe can't afford or don't have access to certain food groups, or maybe don't have a built environment that's conducive to physical activity. And so there are definitely challenges along the way, but there are lots of people out there that are good resources to help get you past those challenges. So, talk with your healthcare professional first to see if exercise and nutritional changes are right for you before just jumping into any of them, and to get referrals to other practitioners to add to your team. I mentioned this quote in the first webinar, so I think it's good to come back to it here in the last one, where health is a resource for everyday life and not the objective of living. So, there are a lot of people at the clinic that can be a resource for you to help you live better, to help you uh, improve or increase your health span. So definitely take advantage of those people. And that's it for this webinar and the whole webinar series. So thank you very much to everybody who attended the webinars or who have listened to the recordings. I hope they were useful. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the clinic. We're more than happy to take those on. And if you have any questions about this webinar, you're welcome to unmute yourself or to type anything into the chat box. And here's some contact information for the clinic if you want to reach out. Okay, so it looks like there are no questions for today. So enjoy the rest of your day in the sunshine.